I had my hand flat on iron that was still red when I understood that nobody in that room was going to stop me. 40 men at a long table, a war on one end of it, and a lie on the other. The oath said a nameless woman could speak at that table exactly once in her life, if she was willing to pay the hold price for it. And the hold price was the iron. And the iron was right there in the brazier, where it had sat all morning going the colour of a sunset, while men argued over who deserved to die next. Somebody behind me said my name like a plea. I looked at the man at the head of the table who had gone the grey of old ash, who had not moved, who could have ended this with one word and would not use it because he did not know yet what I knew. Then I closed my hand. It began 11 days before that, on my knees in a corridor, singing to nobody. I want to say at the outset that I liked scrubbing floors. People find that difficult, so I will explain it once. Blackfen Hold has 400 paces of gallery on the second floor, black flagstone, cold as a river, and at the 6th hour it is empty. Nobody sees you. Nobody needs anything from you. You put your brush in the water, and the water goes grey, and then you have a clean thing where a dirty thing was, which is more than most people at that court could say about a day's work. I was 24 that spring, and I had been in that scullery 6 years, and there was nothing wrong with my life except that it was small and quiet, and had a hole in the middle of it I did not go near. So I hummed. That was all. It was a habit, older than my sense. It was the Fenwater Harvest Song, the long one, the one that runs 17 verses, because it was designed to get a valley through 17 fields. Every child from the water farms could sing it before they could carry a bucket. I did not sing the words anymore. I have not sung the words since I was 18 years old. I hummed the shape of it, which is a different thing and costs less. I got as far as the 5th verse, the one about the ferry, and the door of the war room opened. I will describe that door. It is oak, and it is 9 feet high, and it has iron on it in the shape of a wolf's jaw, and in 6 years I had never once seen it opened from the inside during a council. Every man in the iron territories who mattered was behind it, 2 of the eastern holdings, the whole war council, the last 3 commanders of a border war that had been eating men for 6 years, and my brush was in my hand, and my bucket was 2 feet from the threshold, and I was the only living thing in that corridor. He came out. I had seen the king before. The way you see weather. Across a hall. From behind a serving line, a tall, dark shape. At the top of a room that everybody arranged themselves around without being told. I had never once seen his face. He stopped 4 paces away and looked at me on my knees in the water with an expression I had no name for at the time. I have a name for it now. It is the face of a man who has heard a voice through a wall in a house where everyone is dead. Behind him the room had gone silent in the specific way rooms go when 40 men are all deciding at once not to be the one who speaks. Where did you learn that? It was not a question. It did not have room in it to be a question. I got up, because you do not stay on the floor for a king, and the water went into my sleeve, and I put my hands behind me because they were filthy. My lord, I did not mean to be heard. That is not what I asked you. There is a thing I do instead of panicking, which is that I become extremely accurate. I learnt it at home, my lord. It is a work song. There is no harm in it. It is about a ferry and some barley. Sing the 5th verse. The corridor was very cold. I do not sing, I said. I hum. Something went through his face and got caught halfway. I thought, I want to be honest about how wrong I was. Because I was wrong about him for 11 days, and every single wrong thing I thought was reasonable. I thought, he is furious, and I am going to be turned out of this hold by nightfall for making noise outside a war. Then a steward came up behind him, a neat grey man with a tally board under one arm, and said in a voice like a warm cloth, "Forgive her, my lord. The scullery is mine to correct. It will not happen again. Rennick, my lord? The king did not look away from me. Do not correct her. He went back inside. The 9-foot door shut. I stood in the corridor with a wet sleeve and a brush, and no idea whatsoever what had just happened to me, and Steward Rennick smiled at me with great kindness and said I had better finish the gallery before the 7th hour, and I went back down on my knees. The council did not resume that day. 40 men rode in from 3 holdings and sat in that room for 4 hours, and at the 6th hour the King of the Iron Territories walked out of it over a floor scrubber humming, and it did not resume until the following morning. That is the part everyone in Blackfen was chewing on by supper. Nobody could tell me why. I could not tell them why. I lay on my cot in the scullery loft that night, doing the arithmetic of it and getting nothing, and I did not sleep well. And I have not been bored since. Hester ran the scullery, and had run it since before the war. She sat me down the next morning with the specific gentleness of a woman about to say something expensive. Orla, was it the Fenwater song? It is only a work song. It is a Fenwater song, she said, and this is the house that lost Fenwater. And you have been careful for 6 years, and last night you were not. I could have gone. That is the thing I want set down plainly. Because of everything after, the road out of Blackfen was open. I had 11 silver put by in a jar under a floorboard, and I was nobody's property. Hester offered me the cart to the coast that morning, with her own money in it. I thought about the 5th verse, and the look on that man's face. I said no. I stayed. Nobody made me. That was mine. He came down to the scullery on the 3rd day, which no king has ever done in the history of kings. He came alone, at a bad hour, and stood in a doorway built for people a foot shorter than he is, and the whole scullery went down like a field in wind, and I put a pot back into the water, so that my hands would have somewhere to be. My lord. I have been informed, he said, that I frightened you. You did not. Hester says otherwise. Hester is not in charge of what frightens me. He looked at the floor for a moment. When he looked up, something in his face had loosened by perhaps the width of a hair. My sister sang that song. The scullery did not move. Nobody in that room breathed. Yrsa, he said. She was fostered in the Fenwater Valley for 4 years as a child. She came home with a valley accent and 17 verses and a great deal of opinions about barley, and she sang it in this house until she was 26 years old, and I have not heard it since the year the valley burned. He stopped. He put one hand on the frame of the door, which I noticed, and filed, and did not say anything about. I heard 4 bars of it through an oak door, and I did not know what I was doing until I was already in the corridor. So that is why. You are owed the reason. The King of the Iron Territories, explaining himself to a woman with her arms in a washtub. I am sorry, I said. Do not be. I am sorry that it hurt. He went very still. That is a different sentence, he said at last. Nobody has used that one. He left. I stood there with my hands in cooling water and something enormous and unwelcome turning over in me, and Hester hit me with a cloth, which is the traditional response. That night his wolf came to the scullery door and lay down across it. I met it the way you meet a landslide. It was black, and it was the size of a cart horse, and it put its head down on its paws in the doorway of the meanest room in the hold and stayed until the fires were banked. He is not allowed in here, said one of the girls, from underneath a table. I looked at the wolf. The wolf looked at me with eyes like the underside of ice and did not move for 4 hours. The child came the next morning. His name was Tobin. He was 6. And he belonged to the hold the way a draft does. Everyone knew he was there and nobody was responsible. His mother had been a Blackfen warrior and had died in the 2nd year of the war. He had not spoken since the burning. Not to Hester, not to the healers, not to the king. 6 years. He followed the wolf. That was his whole arrangement with the world. Where the wolf went, Tobin went. 4 paces back. and the wolf had begun going to the scullery. So on the fourth morning, I had a wolf across my doorway and a small silent boy sitting on an upturned crate, watching me scrub the second-floor gallery with an intensity that could have started a fire. I did not talk at him. People had been talking at that child for 6 years, and it had accomplished nothing. I gave him a brush. By the 7th day, he was doing 4 paces of flagstone for every 50 of mine, badly, with total commitment. And he had begun humming, flat, tuneless, 1 bar behind me, and on the 8th day, I heard him hum the fairy verse without me, and had to go and stand in a storeroom for a while. Lady Sunniver of Harrowmere found us on the gallery on the 9th day. She had come for the peace council with her father's banner, and an understanding, apparently long-standing and entirely one-sided, about who would be sitting beside the king when the war ended. She looked at me, and at the child, and at the wolf lying in the sun at the end of the gallery, and she said, to her women, at a volume built for the purpose, how very affecting. The hold has found a use for the enemy's leavings. I have thought since about all the things I could have said. What I did was put my brush back in the water, because Tobin had gone the colour of the flagstones, and because a boy who has not spoken in 6 years does not need a fight happening over his head. The gallery is wet, my lady, I said. Mind your hem. If you want to know how a floor scrubber ended up standing at the war table with her hand on hot iron, and what a boy who had not spoken in 6 years finally said, in front of the whole council, stay with me and follow along so you do not lose the thread. We are 9 days out from it now. It gets much harder before it gets kind. He sent for me on the 10th night. Not to the war room, to the North Gallery, which had been shut since the year of the burning. Edric came to fetch me, the king's second, an enormous quiet man who had never in 6 years said a word to me that was not about a door. He will not tell you why he is doing this, Edric said on the stairs. He does not know. I have served him 11 years, and I have not seen him open that gallery for the priests, his council, or me. The North Gallery was cold and full of sheeted furniture, and there was one window uncovered at the end of it, and a young woman's belongings on a table under it, arranged the way you arrange things when you cannot decide to put them away. Alaric was standing at the window with his hands behind his back. You may come in, he said, or you may go, and I will not ask you again either way. I came in. That was mine too. Her name was Yrsa, he said. She went back to Fenwater, the spring of the burning, because she was godmother to a ferryman's daughter, and she would not miss a naming. That is the entire reason she was in that valley. A naming, and a promise, and 11 miles of bad road. My lord, I have said this out loud twice in 6 years. He turned around. The second time was just now. Do not stop me, I will not manage it again. So I did not stop him. He stood at that window and told me about a sister who came home from a fostering with a valley accent, and never entirely lost it, and about a war he had opened the week they brought her back, and about 6 years of border ground taken a mile at a time from Pax who had done it, and about how none of it had produced a single hour in which he had felt anything he could describe as satisfaction. He stopped. He looked at the sheeted furniture as if it had spoken. I do not know why I cannot end it, he said. I have terms. I have had terms for 2 years. Every season the council brings me a reason, and every reason is good, and I keep the war. May I ask you something no one asks you? You have been asking me things no one asks me since the corridor. Do you want to end it? The silence in that room had weight in it. Every day, he said. Every single day. And then a letter comes, or a raid comes, or Rennick puts a report on my table, and I look at the paper and I think, she would want the blood. He shook his head once. And I do not believe it when I think it. That is the part I have told nobody. I do not believe my sister wanted a single one of these 6 years, and I have spent them anyway. I was 3 paces away, and it was 2 paces further than either of us needed, and I felt the space between us as a thing I could not set down. "Sing it," he said. "I am asking, not ordering. If you say no, that is the end of it, and I will not raise it again." "I do not sing," I said. "Not since I was 18. He accepted that. That is what undid me. He did not push. He simply accepted it, like a man who has learned what it costs to finish a thing. "Then hum it," he said. "The 5th verse. About the ferry." And I stood in a dead woman's gallery and hummed 11 bars to the King of the Iron Territories, who put one hand on the back of a sheeted chair and kept it there until I was done. The ledger was on the table in that gallery. I saw it the second time I went up, 2 days later, sent with a tray, because Edric had decided I was the only person the king would take food from. It was not hidden. That is what I have never gotten over. It was simply in a room nobody was allowed in. The Fenwater Endowment. 6 years of entries in a hand I had by then seen on 3 orders and 1 letter of appointment. Grain, silver, roofing lead, a schoolmaster's wage, a healer's fee, paid quarterly, without interruption, through the whole of the war, to the survivors of a burned valley belonging to nobody. Names down the margin. 209 of them. Mine was on the 3rd page. O, of the water farms, orphaned, 8 sil. Quarterly, placed Blackfen Scullery, year 1. I sat down on the floor of that gallery, in a dead woman's room, holding 6 years of my own life in somebody else's handwriting. He had been feeding the valley he was avenging, every quarter, for 6 years, out of his own hand, while 40 men downstairs argued about whether to take another mile of ground for her. My 11 silver in the jar, under the floorboard. The place in the scullery I had thought I had earned by walking 11 miles at 18 with nothing. There is a moment when you stop being a woman watching a strange, sad man from a distance. Something in me that had been gentle stopped being gentle. Because I could count. 209 names, and every quarter of it routed through the steward's tally board, and I had been in that house 6 years and never once heard a whisper of an endowment. And a house that size cannot keep a secret unless somebody is being paid to keep it. I went and found Hester, and I asked her one question, and it was not about the king. Who reads his letters before he does? Hester looked at me for a long moment. "Rennick," she said, "since the burning. He asked for it. He said the king should be spared the worst of them. The accusation came the next morning, and it came from Sunniva, which is exactly how it was meant to come. She brought it into the great hall in front of the assembled council, with the enemy envoys already 3 days out on the road, that the woman scrubbing the king's floors was Fenwater born, that the valley was enemy ground by the terms of the war, that the king's own hall was harbouring enemy blood in a war season, and that the punishment under Blackfen law was the road and the brand, or worse. She was right. That was the trouble. Every word of it was true. And I want you to notice, I noticed it at the time and did not understand what I was noticing, that it was Rennick who had, 2 days earlier, gently and helpfully asked Hester which valley her scullery girl came from. For the household roles, so that everything would be in order. I stood in that hall while 40 men decided what I was. "She is nobody," Sunniva said. "She is a diversion." "My lord, you cannot let a scullery girl," Alaric stood up. "She is on my rolls," he said. "She has been on my rolls for 6 years, at 8 silver a quarter, and so are 208 others out of that valley, and I have paid every one of them out of my own hand since the year it burned." The hall came apart. I have never heard a noise like that. 6 years of a war, and the man prosecuting it standing up in front of his own council to say he had been feeding the other side's orphans the entire time. 2 commanders were on their feet, shouting the word treason before he finished. Haramir's banner walked out of that hall and did not come back that day. He let them shout. Then he said, into it, without raising his voice, they were not the enemy. They were 11-year-olds in a burned valley. My sister died standing at a naming in that valley, and if I had let their children starve to avenge her, I would have had to explain it to her. And I have never once been able to compose that sentence. He looked down the hall at me and did not look away. You may all consider that as you like. It is done, it has been done for 6 years, and it will go on being done after the peace. The council broke in disorder. Edric got me out through the kitchens. Behind us, Steward Rennick stood at the edge of the hall with his tallyboard under his arm, and he was not angry. He was calculating. I saw it. I did not know what I was looking at yet. The Peace Council convened 4 days later, and Rennick brought out the letter at the 3rd hour. He did it beautifully. He wept. He said he had kept it back for 6 years out of love for his king. He said he could no longer watch a man be talked out of his own sister's dying wish by a valley woman with a song. Yrsa's last letter. Her hand. Written at the ferry house at Fenwater the night before the burning, sealed and carried out by a boy who died on the road, recovered from the ash by the steward himself. He read it aloud to 40 men and 2 enemy envoys. Brother, the water farms have turned. They opened the ford to the Harrowpacks. Whatever comes of me here, do not let this valley stand. Burn the barley fields to the ferrystone and take it back a mile at a time. Yrsa, the hall made a sound like a door closing. I watched the king of the Iron Territories go grey. I watched him put both hands flat on that table. I watched 6 years of terms and 2 enemy envoys, and every hour of what he had told me at a window in a dead woman's gallery come apart in front of him. Because the letter was in her hand, and he had no reason on this earth to doubt the man who had spared him the worst of them for 6 years. He said, take the envoys into custody. And I said, that letter is a forgery. 40 heads turned. There is one law in that hold that lets a nameless person speak at the war table. It is old, and it is called the Hearth Oath. And it exists because Blackfen's founders knew that the truth sometimes lives in the scullery. It can be used once in a life. The hold price is the iron. You put your hand to the brand in front of the council, and if you are lying, you have burned yourself for a lie in front of every lord in the territories, and you go out on the road with the mark on you forever. The brazier had been at the end of that table all morning. Somebody behind me said my name like a plea. I think it was Edric. Alaric said, Orla, do not. And I said, I am Fenwater born. There is not a man in this room who will hear me without it. Then I closed my hand. I am not going to describe the iron. It is enough to say that it takes your voice for a moment and gives it back changed, and that I have a white mark across that palm now, that will be there when I am 80. I put my hand in the water bowl they brought, and I stood at that table, and I said, Yrsa of Blackfen was fostered 4 years in the Fenwater Valley. She had the accent. She had the songs. And no one raised in that valley has ever in their life said burn the barley fields to the ferry stone, because the barley is above the ferry, and the water runs the other way. You cannot burn to the ferry stone. It is the first thing a Fenwater child learns, in the 5th verse of a song your sister sang in this house, until she was 26 years old. I turned around, and I looked at the boy who had come in behind Edric, because he went where the wolf went, and the wolf had come into the council chamber and lain down beside me on the flagstones in front of the entire peace council of the Iron Territories. Tobin, I said, help me. The ferry verse, and a 6-year-old who had not spoken in 6 years sang 11 bars of a Fenwater harvest song in a room full of armed men. His voice was small, and it was flat, and it was wrong in 2 places. and it was the most extraordinary sound I have ever heard in my life, and I found that I was singing it with him. The words, all of them, for the first time since I was 18 years old, and it took something out of me I have not entirely gotten back, and would not take back if I could. My legs went. I went down on the flagstones halfway through the verse, and I finished it from there, with a burned hand in a bowl, and a wolf against my shoulder, and Tobin's fist wound into my sleeve. The barley stands above the ford. The water runs to sea. The water runs to sea, away from the ferrystone. It is in the song. It has always been in the song. 200 years of children singing it into the fields. The chamber was completely silent. Then Alaric picked up his sister's letter and read 4 words of it again, and set it down, and looked at the man who had wept over it. "Rennick," he said, "who taught you the valley?" The steward had run the endowment for 6 years. That was the thread Edric pulled by the end of that night. 209 names, quarterly, unaudited, through one tally board, and a war whose end would have closed the ledger. The forgery had been written to be read on the day the peace was signed, and no earlier. He had kept it 6 years for the same reason a man keeps a knife. He had not wanted vengeance. He had wanted the war, because the war was where his hand was. The peace was signed 11 days later. It was not clean afterward, and I will not pretend it was. Haramir took its banner home and has not sent it back. 2 commanders resigned rather than put their names on terms with the packs that burned the Fenwater Ford, and one of them was a good man. And Alaric let him go without argument, and did not sleep the night he did it. There are men in that hall who look at my hand before they look at my face. The endowment was read into the treaty by name, 209 of them, out loud, which took a while, and which I gather is now something the Eastern Holdings complain about at length. Rennick was not executed. Alaric did something colder. He was stripped, and turned out, and sent to the Fenwater Valley to work under the schoolmaster he had been paying for 6 years, and he is there now, and he will die there, and everyone in that valley knows exactly what he did. A year on, this is what my life is. The North Gallery is open. The sheets came off in the autumn, and it is the warmest room in the hold now, because it faces south, and somebody finally noticed. Yrsa's things are on a shelf where people can see them, and her name is on the treaty, and once a season the ferryman's daughter she was godmother to, grown, 20, extremely opinionated about barley, comes up the road to Blackfen, and stays a week. And the 2 of us are a menace to that household. Tobin talks. Constantly, ceaselessly, everyone in that hold is now praying quietly for the return of the silence. He calls me by my name, and he calls the king by his, which nobody has corrected. And he sleeps in the room off ours, with a wolf across the door. There was a naming in the spring, in the great hall, with the whole of the territories watching. And Alaric put his hand out to me in front of all of them, and said the word out loud that he had not used for anyone since he was 22. Sister's song, hearth, home, mine. And I took the hand, and my burned palm went into his, and neither of us flinched. And I would like the record to show that I did not cry until afterward, in a storeroom, which is my traditional venue. He still cannot finish the 17th verse. He gets to the 16th and stops. So we leave it. 6 years is a long time to hold your breath, and you do not get it all back in one season. Last night I came up the stairs late and heard him in the North Gallery, humming The Shape of It, with the window open, 1 bar behind me, the way Tobin used to be. I did not go in. Some things are better heard through a door. So tell me, do you think Yrsa would have forgiven the 6 years, or only the endowment? The hold is genuinely split on it, and I would like to settle a wager. Tell me your theory below. And if you want to know what happened when Haramir finally sent its banner back, and what Lady Suniva wanted in exchange for it, comment the fairy stone, and stay with me. Alaric and I are not finished. Follow along, and I will tell you that one too. And wherever you are listening from tonight, I hope somebody in your house is humming. There is a sound a great hall makes when 300 people realize at the same moment that they are about to watch something they cannot unwatch. I was on the second step, with my hand on the rail, and the words already out of me, the old words. The ones you cannot take back once the second half is spoken, and the room had gone white at the edges the way a room does when your body has begun leaving before you have. Someone dropped a cup. Nobody picked it up. The man at the top of the steps had not moved. He had gone the grey of wet stone, and he was looking at me the way you look at a fire you set yourself, and every soul in that hall was waiting for him to answer me. Because a severance is not a severance until it is answered. All he had to do was say the words back. He opened his mouth. I held on to the rail with everything I had left in both hands. And he said no. It started 9 weeks before that, on the night of the claiming ball, in a laundry, with my dress on somebody else. My name is Marin of Aldrin, and on the night in question I was 24 years old, and worth precisely one thing, and the thing was not me. House Aldrin holds the Windgate. Held is closer. 11 miles of pass through the North Mountains, the only road wide enough for carts between the Iron Territories and everything above them, and my family had kept it for 200 years, and had, by that autumn, exactly one member left with a claim on it, and she was standing in a laundry in a stolen apron. My father died the first winter, my brother the second. My uncle Baldric came down from the coast to hold the seat until I married, which was very kind of him, and I have never in my life been so grateful for anything as I was, at 19, to have a grown man take that weight off me. I found out at 22 that he had been selling the pass a mile at a time to the Draymore packs, in pieces, under lease. I found out at 24 that I was going to a claiming ball. That is what they call it. Every house of the North sends its eligible daughters to the hold at midwinter, and they stand along a dais in order of rank while the Alpha King walks the line, and at the end of it he speaks a name. Or he does not. 300 years of it. My mother went to one. She was not chosen, and she told me once, in a bad winter, that it was the happiest night of her life. And I understood exactly what would happen if a king with a border problem walked that line and saw the last daughter of the house that owns the only road north. He would not be choosing a woman. He would be choosing an 11-mile pass with a face on it, and my uncle would have his lease confirmed by the crown, and I would spend the rest of my life as a signature. I will not be a deed of land. I said that out loud to a laundry maid on the night of the ball, and I have had cause to say it twice more since. Her name was Nessa. She was 17, and she thought the whole thing was the funniest situation she had ever been party to. They will know, she said, buttoning me into grey wool. They will not. Nobody looks at you. That is true, said Nessa, with feeling, and put on 11 pounds of blue Aldrin silk, and went to go stand in a line and be looked at by a king, and I want it on the record that she volunteered. That she was paid for it. That she thought it was a lark. And that everything bad that came of it came from a direction neither of us was watching. So at the 8th hour of midwinter, I was standing against the wall of the great hall of Blackfen Hold, with a tray of empty cups, in grey, invisible, exactly where I had planned to be, watching a line of the most beautiful women in the North arrange themselves along a dais in order of rank. He came in late. That was the first strange thing, and I noticed it, and did not know what to do with it. A king does not arrive late to his own ceremony. The herald had already read the list twice. The line had been standing for the better part of an hour, and one of the Haramir girls had begun to cry very quietly out of sheer nerves. He came in through the side door with his second at his shoulder and mud on his boots, and the hall stood up. And I got my first look at Rurik of the Iron Territories. He was perhaps 34 and built like a door, dark, unornamented, no crown, one old white scar through the back of his hand. He crossed to the dais and stood in front of the whole assembled North, and he did not look at the line. Not once. He looked at the herald, and then at the roll in the herald's hands, and then at the far end of the hall in a way I later learnt meant he was doing arithmetic on somebody. "Who read the summons?" he said. The herald stammered something. I asked who read the summons out, not who wrote it. And a voice from the floor of the hall said, warmly, "The Regent of Aldrin, my lord, in your absence, as the eldest house present," and that was my uncle Baldric, in his good coat, being helpful. Rurik looked at him for 4 full seconds. Then he turned around and walked the line. I have thought a great deal about what he was doing. At the time I thought he was choosing. He walked the whole length of that dice at the pace of a man inspecting a fence, and he did not stop, and he did not speak. And 22 women of the great houses of the North watched the most powerful wolf alive go past them without a flicker. He got to Nessa in 11 pounds of Aldrin blue at the top of the line. He stopped. Every person in that hall leaned forward. My uncle Baldric put his hand on the back of a chair. And the king of the Iron Territories looked at that girl for a moment, and something went over his face that I could not read from 40 feet, and he said, clearly enough for the room, "You are not her." Nessa, to her eternal credit, said nothing at all. He turned around. He came off that dice, and he walked into the body of the hall, past the Haramir daughters, past the Eastern Holdings, past 100 people who moved out of his way without deciding to. And he came the whole length of that room in a straight line to the wall where the servers stood, and stopped in front of a woman in grey wool, holding a tray of empty cups. "Dance with me. I would like to report that I said something clever." "I am carrying cups, my lord." Bron, the enormous fair-haired man at his shoulder, came and took the tray out of my hands with the expression of a man receiving a corpse. 300 people were watching. 300. The musicians had stopped. Somewhere on the dice, one of the Haramir girls made a noise like a kettle, and I understood, standing there, that I had 2 choices, and one of them was to say no, out loud in front of the North, to a man who could have had me hanged for the apron I was wearing and that he had asked, and that a question is a question. I could have said no. I want that written down. Because of everything that came after, he asked, in front of witnesses, and I stood there for a full breath deciding, and then I put my hand out. Nobody made me do anything that night. He was not a good dancer. He was a competent one, which is worse, because it meant he had been taught and had never once enjoyed it. He held me at the distance of a man handling something borrowed. "You are not a servant," he said, when we had gone half the floor. "I am tonight. Your hands are wrong. And you came in on the second beat, which nobody learns in a laundry. A turn. And my wolf has been trying to walk me across this room since I came through the door, and he does not do that for laundry maids, and I would very much like to know what he thinks he is doing, because I certainly do not." That was the moment the fear arrived properly. Not of him. I want to be precise about this because it matters. I was not afraid of the king. I was afraid because I could not tell what he knew. If he knew I was Marin of Aldrin, then this was a man cornering an 11-mile pass in a laundry apron in front of the whole North, and it was the cleverest thing anyone had ever done to me. If he did not know if he had genuinely crossed that hall for a woman in grey, then something had happened to me tonight that I had no arrangements for. "What is your name?" he said. "Nessa." The music went on for 4 bars. "No," he said. "It is not." "My lord, you may keep it," he said. "You may keep all of it, but I am not going to say that name to you, because it is not yours, and I have had a great deal of lying done at me tonight already." The dance ended. He let go of my hand a half beat after he should have, which I noticed and filed, and did not say anything about for 9 weeks. Then he stepped back and said, to the hall at large, in a voice built for a battlefield, "There will be no claiming. Not tonight. Not this winter. I did not summon this ball, and I have not consented to one in 3 years, and every daughter standing on that dais has been brought here in cold weather on somebody's forgery. Go home. My house will pay your roads." And he walked out. If you want to know what happens to a woman who has just been danced with by a king in front of the entire North while wearing someone else's apron, and whether he ever found out whose face he had actually been looking for, stay with me and follow along so you do not lose the thread. It gets a great deal more frightening from here, before it gets kind. Here is what a forgery means, in case it went past you the way it went past me for a fortnight. Somebody had summoned 22 eligible daughters of the North to Blackfen Hold in the king's name without the king. Somebody had wanted every great house watching when a king walked a line, and had wanted, specifically, one house at the head of that line in Aldrin Blue. And when the king of the Iron Territories asked who had read the summons out, my uncle Baldric had answered warmly and by name, in front of everyone, because he was proud of it. I did not go home to the coast with him. I stayed at Blackfin, in the laundry, as Nessa's second, at 4 silver a quarter. That was mine. Nobody made me. Baldric raged for 2 days, and then went. And I understood later that he went because a niece inside the hold was more useful to him than a niece on the coast, and that I had walked into the exact place he wanted me. The wolf found me on the 4th day. I was hanging linen in the drying yard, and something came around the corner of the wall and stopped, and it was black and enormous, and it looked at me the way a creditor looks at a door. Then it lay down in the middle of a yard full of wet sheets and did not leave for the rest of the afternoon. The next day it herded me. I have no other word. I came out with a basket, and it put itself against my left side and walked me the entire length of the lower court, past the forge, past the kennels, and delivered me to the foot of the North Tower stair, where it sat down and looked at the stair, and then at me, and then at the stair. "No," I said. It looked at the stair. Absolutely not. Above us, a window opened, and the king of the Iron Territories put his head out and said, in the voice of a man who has already lost this argument several times, "Ignore him. He is very persuasive, my lord. He is a menace, and he will be dealt with." A pause. "Do not go up the stair." I was not going to. "Good," he said, and then stood there in the window for another 5 seconds, and then shut it with unnecessary force. That was the pattern for a fortnight, and it was, I am sorry to say, extremely funny. His wolf would do something outrageous, lie across the door of the counting room while I was inside it, walk me to the king's own table at a public supper, and sit down beside my stool, and Rurik would arrive at speed, 4 seconds too late, having clearly been elsewhere fighting himself, and stand there with his jaw working, while 100 people watched their king be publicly overruled by his own second nature. He never once apologized for it. He also never once made it stop. The Great Hall happened on the 19th day. Winter Court. Every man of rank in Blackfen, the Eastern Holdings, 3 envoys from Draymore, the king on the wolf throne, and the whole business of the North on the floor. I was at the back with the household, holding a jug. Because that is where you stand. The wolf came off the dice. 300 people watched an animal the size of a plough horse come down off a throne, cross the entire length of the Great Hall of the Iron Territories, and lie down at the boots of a laundry maid. Not near them. On them. The hall made a sound I have never heard before or since. The Draymore envoys were on their feet. Somebody said the word Luna out loud, and somebody else told them to be quiet in a voice that carried. And I stood there with a jug and 11 stone of wolf on my feet, and looked up the length of that room at a man on a throne who had gone entirely still, and who did not order it back, and who did not explain it, and who I watched him do it, closed his eyes for exactly 4 seconds, and opened them and said, "Continue," and let the whole north see him lose. He came to the laundry that night, which no king has ever done. "I am going to say a thing badly," he said from the doorway. "I have been composing it since the ball, and it has not improved. Then say it badly. I do not want this. That is a wonderful start. I have a border war with the Draymore Pax that has been 8 months from breaking for 2 years. I have a pass in the north I cannot legally garrison. I have a council that would like me married to the Eastern Holdings by spring." He put one hand on the frame of the door. "And I have a wolf who has decided, and who will not be reasoned with, and who is right. And I have spent 19 days constructing arguments against a woman I have spoken to twice, and losing all of them, and I am tired. You have not once asked me my name." "No." "Why?" "Because you will tell me when you have decided to," he said, "and I have had enough of this year's worth of people arranging me." 3 sentences and a whole man in them. I was 4 paces away. It was 2 paces further than either of us needed, and exactly as far as either of us could manage. And I felt that laundry as a room I could not walk across. "I will not be a deed of land," I said. He did not ask what I meant. That is the thing. He looked at me for a long moment and did not ask. And I understood that he had known, or nearly known, for some while, and had been waiting for me to hand it to him rather than take it. "No," he agreed. "You will not." I found the Windgate rolls 11 days later, in the counting room, looking for something else entirely. 2 winters of muster. 50 men at a time, rotated, paid out of the king's own purse and not the treasury, listed under no banner, garrisoned at the 11-mile pass of the Windgate, the pass my uncle had leased away in pieces, the pass no king may legally garrison without the holding house's consent. The pass I had been told for 3 years was quietly rotting. And a line at the bottom of the second winter's roll, in a hand I had by then seen on 4 orders, "Aldrin cannot hold it, and will not ask. Hold it anyway. Do not put my name on this." He had been keeping my family's road alive for 2 years, with his own money and no banner, while my uncle sold it under lease, while I sat on the coast believing I was the last thing standing between the Windgate and the Draymore Pax. I sat down on the floor of the counting room. And then I did the arithmetic properly, for the first time, and it came out somewhere I did not like. Because if he had held that pass for 2 winters at his own cost, then he had never needed to marry it. He had never needed me. There was no version of the ball where the King of the Iron Territories walked a line looking for 11 miles of road with a face on it. And there never had been, and I had spent 9 weeks protecting myself from a danger that did not exist, while the man who had built the ball, forged the summons, and put my house at the head of that line, was still on the coast with my seal in his box. Something in me that had been afraid stopped being afraid. I went upstairs and I did not knock. "His name is Baldric of Aldrin," I said. "He is my uncle. He is my regent. I am Marin of Aldrin, and I am the last of that house, and I would like to know what you intend to do about the man who forged your summons, because I have decided to stop waiting to find out." Rurik stood up very slowly. "Marin," he said. 9 weeks. He had not used a name at me in 9 weeks. I had not known what it would do. "Say it again." "Later," he said. "Come and look at this." My uncle's answer came 4 days after that, and it was good. He came up from the coast with the betrothal contract. It was beautiful work. My seal, my hand, or near enough that 3 men swore to it, dated the spring before the ball, binding Marin of Aldrin to the son of the Draymore Alpha, with the Windgate as the portion, sealed, witnessed, filed with the coastal court a full season before the king had ever set eyes on me. Which meant, in front of the entire winter court and 3 Draymore envoys, that the king of the Iron Territories had danced with, favoured, and been publicly claimed by a woman already contracted to the packs he was 8 months from war with. It nearly worked. I want to be honest about how nearly. 2 of the Eastern holdings called for me to be turned out of the hold that same hour. The Draymore envoys demanded I be surrendered to the contract. Bronn told me afterward that it was the closest he had come in 11 years to seeing his king put in a position with no move in it, because Rurik could either hand me over and be seen to have been played, or refuse and hand Draymore a cause for the war that had been waiting 2 years to start. And Baldric stood in the middle of the floor being sorrowful about it. Then he made his second move, which was the one I have never forgiven, because the first one was only politics. He produced Nessa. He had had her 4 days. She was 17 and grey-faced, and she had been made to understand what happens to a laundry maid who impersonates a noblewoman at a royal ceremony, which is the road and the brand. And he had explained to her warmly, helpfully, that all of this could be avoided if she would simply tell the court the truth, which was that Marin of Aldrin had put her in that blue dress deliberately, to be seen refusing the ball, in order to be pursued. She stood up in front of the North and said it. She was crying. She looked at me the entire time, and I nodded at her, twice, because there was nothing else I could give her. The word they used was seduction. The charge underneath it was worse, that the king had been worked, in his own hall, by a border house, for a pass. Rurik started to stand up. And this is the part everyone tells wrong, so I will tell it myself. He was going to save me. I could see the whole shape of it forming the public claim, the name spoken, the hand out in front of the court, the thing every person in that hall was braced for. And it would have finished him, a king who answers the charge of being seduced for a pass, by immediately claiming the woman has not answered it. He would have been the man who was worked, for the rest of his life, in every hall in the North, and the war would have come in the spring, with that story riding in front of it. So I got there first. I went up onto the second step of the dais, which no unlanded person may do, and I said, loudly enough for the back of the hall, "The Windgate is not mine to give, and I do not want it. I renounce the claim of Aldrin, in full, before this court. The pass goes to the crown tonight, freely, with no portion, no contract, and no marriage attached to it, and I will sign that in front of every one of you before I sign anything else." The hall came apart. Baldric was shouting something about the coastal court. It did not matter. A house's claim dies with its last holder's word, and I was the last holder, and I had just made myself, in front of 300 witnesses, a woman with no land, no name worth anything, and no value to any man in that room. Which took the whole charge apart at the hinge. You cannot be seduced for a pass by a woman who has just given the pass away for nothing. But it left the other half. And the other half was that a king had crossed a hall for me in front of the North, and his wolf had chosen me on the floor of this one, and every soul present had seen it, and no renunciation on earth was going to unmake that. So I did the other thing. There is a right in the old law that belongs to the one the bond falls on, and it exists because the North has never entirely trusted its kings. If a wolf's bond settles where the pack cannot bear it, the one chosen may speak the severance and end it. It costs. Everyone knows it costs. It is the only thing in that hall I have ever been afraid of. I put my hand on the rail, and I spoke the first half of it. There is a sound a great hall makes when 300 people realize at once that they are about to watch something they cannot unwatch. It came for me before I had finished. I had been told it was pain. And it was not pain. It was subtraction, the whole warm weight of a thing I had not admitted I was carrying being taken out of me by the roots, and the room going white at the edges, and my own hands on the rail, somewhere far below me. There was blood coming out of my nose. I remember being distantly annoyed about the step. A severance is not a severance until it is answered. That is the law. All he had to do was say the words back. He came down off that dice. No, said Rurik of the Iron Territories. Then he went down on one knee on the steps of his own hall in front of the whole of the north, and he took my hands off the rail and put them in his, and he said, "You have just given me an 11-mile pass that I have held for 2 winters with my own men and my own coin under no banner, because your house could not hold it and would not ask. It was never worth anything to me. I did not want it, and I do not need it, and I have never once required it of you." His hands closed. "You gave away everything you had for a thing I did not need, in front of everyone, to keep a charge off me. Do you understand what that leaves standing in this hall?" I could not see him properly. I got out. "What? Only you," he said. Marin, I do not remember the rest of that evening. Bronn tells me the Draymore envoys were gone before the doors shut. Baldric of Aldrin was taken in the yard. I want the aftermath honestly, so here it is. The severance did not complete, but it does not simply close over either. I lost 8 days. I could not get warm until the thaw. There is a hollow place under my breastbone that aches in bad weather, and the healers say it will do that for the rest of my life, and I have decided to consider it a receipt. Baldric was not executed. Rurik did something colder. The coastal court, which had sat on his forgeries for 3 years because he fed it, was made to try him itself, and when it did the arithmetic on what that meant for the men on it, 4 of them went down with him. He is in the Windgate now, on the road crew, widening the pass he sold in pieces. He will be there a long time. Nessa was not punished. I would not permit it, and Rurik did not want to. And when he asked me what I wanted done with her, I said, "Give her wages and a witness's protection and let her sleep. She is 17. And he looked at me for a moment and said, "That is what I was going to say." And I said, "I know, I could see you constructing it." And he said, "Stop doing that. She is the head of that laundry now. She is 20, and she runs it like a border war." It was not clean politically either. 2 of the Eastern holdings had called for me to be turned out, and had to sit at the spring muster with the woman they had called for, and one of them has never once looked me in the face. The Draymore War did not come, but only because a king who had been publicly seen to give away nothing for love was a king they could not read. And unreadable is worth more than strong. A year on, this is what my life is. The Windgate is crown ground, and there are 200 men in it, and the carts run in winter for the first time in 9 years. There is a stone at the 11-mile mark with my father's name and my brother's on it, which was not my idea. There is a wolf who still herds me, entirely without shame, and who has taken to lying across the door of the counting room, specifically when I have work in it. And a king who no longer bothers arriving 4 seconds late to pretend he disapproves. The kiss, since you have been patient, happened in a drying yard in the spring, between 2 lines of wet sheets, where nobody could see us, which he insisted on, and which I found unbearably funny, given that the entire North had watched him kneel. It was brief, and it was not what I expected, which is that nothing in me caught fire. Something in me set down. 9 weeks of a false name and 3 years of being an 11-mile road, put down at once, and the quiet after it was the loudest thing I have ever heard. He uses my name now. Constantly, ceaselessly. He says it at councils, in corridors, across courtyards, to get my attention when I am 4 feet away and looking directly at him. And last month I asked him whether he intended to keep doing it for the rest of our lives. 9 weeks, said the King of the Iron Territories. I had nothing to call you. You may have it back when I am finished. He is not finished. I do not expect him to be. So tell me, do you think he truly did not know who I was when he crossed that hall? Or had he worked it out somewhere around the second beat and simply decided not to say so? Bron and I have had this argument for a year, and I would like it settled by people with no stake in it. Tell me your theory below, and if you want to know what came up the North Road the following autumn with my mother's name on it, because that is a whole other story, and it nearly took the roof off this house comment the second step. And stay with me. Rurik and I are not finished. Follow along, and I will tell you that one too. And wherever you are listening from tonight, if somebody crosses a room for you, let them. It is the getting across that is difficult. The rest is only dancing.